first fire was not struck by man, but given by the lightning to a tree, and someone brave enough to take and plan its carrying into what home could be. That first fire is still burning in the chain of every flame that ever lit from flame. The same spark handed down through joy and pain. The ancestor fire keeping its own claim. The ancestor fire burns in every hearth. The original spark from the earth's own birth. We kept the New Year's fire from the old, a call from dying year to the newborn, the continuity of flame and roll across the threshold of the winter's torn. No village let its fire completely die, for that would break the chain back to the start. The unbroken line of warmth beneath the sky, from the first human fire to the heart. The chain of fire must never be broken. Its continuity, the deepest token. Ancestor fire remembers every meal, prepared above its patient burning glow. Every story that the flames made real, in shadow on the wall from long ago. It holds the smoke of 1,000 winters deep, the residue of all that burned above. The prayers and the names it chose to keep, the ceremonies made from fear and love. The ancestor fire holds every word once said by every living and every honored dead. When two families merge, their fires become one flame from both the sources intertwined. The coals from each home mix to overcome the separation of the separate kind. The wording fire is two ancestral chains, becoming one new chain for the new line. The blending of the different bloods remains into a new particular design. The marriage fire merges too deep past into the shared future that always lasts. Tend your fire as if it holds the chain from the very first strike of spark to stone, for in a sense it does. The long refrain, a fire passed forward, is your fire's own. You are the current keeper of the line, the temporary tender of the flame, before you pass it on to the design of those who come to tend the same old claim. The ancestor fire was here before your name, and will burn after you have done the same. From somewhere to the east, a revolution revolution in the Viking world. Before it everything was human, beast of burden, every load by shoulder hurled. The cartwright shaped the spokes with seasoned oak, the rim of ash that bent without the crack, the hub of elm where centuries have spoke, the wheel that put the whole world on the track. The cartwright's wheel changed everything on land, as much as any ship changed what was planned. He carved each spoke identical in weight, for imbalance in a wheel at speed would shake apart the cart at the wheel's fate, and leave the cargo spilled across the creed. The truth of the wheel is balance all the way, each part equal to its paired and opposite. The tension between spokes that makes the day of perfect rolling what the wheel permits. The wheel teaches balance through its turning art, each spoke essential to the circle's heart. We saw in the wheel what the norns had shown, the great wheel turning of the world's own fate. What goes above comes under, seed is sown. What falls at last comes round to rise, though late. The wheel of fortune was not just a phrase, but a mechanism we could touch and feel. The oak and ash and elm of mortal days, all turning on the same impartial wheel. The cartwright's wheel shows fate in physical form, the turning that continues past the storm. The child who watched the cartwright had a question: if every point on the ring goes up and down, is any point the best for its suggestion of where to be upon the wheel of town? The cartwright smiled and set her hand upon the hub that turned but barely seemed to move. He said the center is the steadiest one, the still point in the turning of the groove. The cartwright teaches find the hub within, the still point where the spinning must begin. The wheel wore out and needed the new rim, the spokes replaced when splitting showed the strain. The hub ringed out when age had made it dim, but the wheel itself continued in its vein. No single part outlasted what it served, but what the parts made together, turning round, outlasted every individual curved component in the rolling and the sound. The wheel is more than all its parts combined. The turning is the thing that none designed.
He carved
his grief. When words had failed and mouth had nothing left, he took the iron chisel to relieve of what accumulated and bereft. Not runes with meaning, but the shape of feeling, the spiral that expressed what had no name, the line that bent like grief back to its healing, the mark that showed the world would not be the same. The prayer stone holds what language cannot keep, the shape of feeling carved in the cold deep. The stone he chose was already half formed, a boulder with a natural hollow face, as if the mountain had been long informed of what would one day fill its waiting space. He worked through winter, every clear cold day, the chisel ring the only sound in white. He spoke to no one, turned all callers away, until the carving found its natural right. The prayer stone makes itself through the carver's hand. The stone already knew what grief had planned. He placed it at the crossing of two paths, where those who passed could stop and touch the face, could feel the carved lines with their fingertips' maths, and add their own grief to the stone's cold grace. Over years the hollow held the touch of every hand that stopped and found the mark, until the stone was polished in the clutch of hundreds reaching in the winter dark. The prayer stone gathers every grief that passes and holds them all beneath the sky's cold glasses. A child who could not speak from birth had found the prayer stone as a first communication. She pressed her palms against the carved ground and felt the shapes as her own narration. The stone that was one man's specific grief became the silent child's own speaking place. Her parents watched her touch the carved relief and saw her body settle into grace. The prayer stone speaks to those without words. The silent find their voice where grief confers. The prayer stone still stands at the crossing point, the hollow worn smooth by 1,000 years. The original carver's specific joint of grief dissolved into the public sphere. No one knows whose sorrow made the mark, whose winter chisel shaped the spiral line, but something of his grief became the dark comes every grief that comes to sign. The prayer stone outlives the prayer that made it, and holds the grief of all whoever said it. Is not passive in the Viking land. It breathes and shifts and sometimes takes its due. The bog that swallows what was poorly planned, the cliff that claims the careless walking through. We gave the land its offerings each year, the first of harvest, first of hunt returned. The blood of animals pressed into fear of going unreturned and unoffered earned. The blood of the land demands its share before it gives the harvest to your care. The bog preserved the ones it chose to keep, the offerings of another older rite. Skin tanned to leather in the acid deep, hair still red after 2,000 nights. They did not go unwilling to the earth. The marks upon them said they'd gone with grace. The carefully placed posture of their worth in the ceremony of their resting place. The bog kept dead chose to become the land, and so were kept by it in time's own hand. We found the old ones' offerings in the field beneath the furrow and the winter's frost. The Bronze Age blade and bone, the plowing revealed the cup of clay that someone prized and lost. Each generation giving to the same deep and patient earth that drinks it all. Each century adding to the claim of what the land has gathered through the fall. The earth holds every offering ever made, a treasury of every prayer that's paid. When the harvest failed, we felt the loss, not as punishment, but as the land reminding us of who was really boss and what we held at the earth's own command. We gave it more, we spoke its name, we knelt, not in the way the foreign priest bowed down, but in the way that farmers always felt the earth deserved before it wore the crown. The Viking kneels to the earth, not to the sky, for earth feeds children while the gods pass by. The blood of the land runs through the Vikings' veins, the mineral of the soil in every bone. of the forest we have always known. We are not separate from the ground we walk. We are the land made briefly into speech, the temporary form of the earth's talk, the way the ground expresses what's in reach. The blood of the land is our own blood too. We are the earth briefly walking through. The cave sang when the tide below was right. The water forced through channels in the stone produced a note that filled the cliff and night with something human voices had not known. The sound was deeper than the deepest drum. It shook the ribs from inside out and through. It was the sound of the world's own hum, the frequency beneath all else held true. The singing cave is the earth finding voice, the geological music without choice. The shamans came from far inland to hear what they could not produce with breath or bone. They said the cave note was the tone of clear connection between the living and the stone. They sat inside and let the frequency vibrate through the body's water and mass, until the boundary between the free individual self and stone would pass. The cave note dissolves the cell's hard edge and joins the body to the stone's own pledge. The sailors knew it as the warning bell, the cave sound carrying 2 miles offshore. When the tide was coming in to swell, the cave would sing its low and rising roar. They steered by it in fog when sight was gone, the sound arriving clearer than the light, the direction of the singing coming on, like a compass made of stone and night. The singing cave guides sailors through the dark, its voice the cliff's own navigating mark. The children dared each other to go in, to sit alone inside the singing stone. Most came back pale and thin about the skin, unable to explain what they had known. One boy stayed 3 days and would not speak for a week after walking out again. And when the words returned, they seemed to seek a different shape than they had used with men. The cave gives back a different kind of child. More quiet, more attending, and more wild. Listen for the singing caves along your way, the places where the world makes its own sound. The frequencies below the humans say that shake the body when they're finally found. The earth has its own music, older still than any instrument that hands have made. The resonance of stone and waters fill the harmonics of the stone's own trade. The singing cave reminds the ear of this. The world was music long before our bliss.
The crows came to him first when he was 5. A single bird that landed on his fist and looked at him as if to feel alive. Beside a child it could not well resist. By 10 a dozen followed him to school. By 20 every crow along the coast would gather at his call like some old rule, and bring him what they found they valued most. The Crow King rules through kingship, not command. The birds chose him before he chose his land. They brought him coins and buttons, scraps of glass, the shiny fragments of the human world. He kept them in a box and let time pass. The crow gave him treasure safely furled, but more than objects they would bring him news. The way they gathered told him where the threat was moving through the land in different views. The way they scattered warned him of the set. The Crow King reads his birds before he reads the world through what the flock's behavior feeds. Before the raid he sent them out ahead to scout the coastline that no ship had jet. They flew beyond the range of any dread and came back circling with what they'd rechecked. The pattern of their circle told the shapes of what awaited on the distant shore. The tight circle meant walls without escapes. The wide one meant the open land in store. The Crow Scout returns before the ship and gives the captain knowledge for the trip. The enemy who feared his crows was wise, for what the birds had seen could not unseen. Their sharp intelligence behind black eyes had memorized the details in between. He never asked them to attack or harm, he only asked for watching and return. The Crow King's power was not force but calm observation and the will to learn. The Crow King's army never draws a blade, but wins with information freely made.
strange. They gathered in the thousands on the hall. They sat in silence for a day's full range, then lifted as one body, one black fall. They never returned to that shore again, the coastline empty of their dark loud voice, as if they'd followed him through weather's vein to wherever croakings go beyond the choice. The croaking's flock accompanies his shade into whatever world the dead have made.
The lake fell in the summer of the drought, 3 feet below its usual winter mark. And what the water's absence brought about was a stone face carved into the dark. The rooms were older than the oldest known, the shapes preceding every form we used, a script that someone carved in the alone, before the language settled and suffused. The drowned runes speak from before the beginning, in a tongue that no living mouth is winning. Came from every shore. They made their copies in the failing light. They argued what the older forms were for, and what they meant through the declining night. Some said a prayer, some said a boundary's law. Some said the name of what had made the lake. Some said the inscription's deepest flaw was thinking it was made for human sake. The drowned rooms may not have been for men, but for the water and the sky, and then when the rain returned, the lake rose slow. The stone face sank beneath the surface gray. The rooms returned to where they chose to go, back into the water and away. The copies made were all that the land kept of what the drought had briefly shown the air. The originals went back to where they'd slept, inside the lake's cold and forgotten care. The drowned rooms give themselves only once to those who chance to be there, not the dunce. What does it mean that knowledge lives below the surface of what we can ordinarily see? That droughts of certainty sometimes bestow the revelations of deep history. Perhaps the world is full of hidden text that waits for the right conditions to emerge. that what we think we know is not complex enough for what the deeper waters search. The drowned runes teach that knowledge hides in depth and surfaces only when the water's left. Dive into the lakes of your own life, the ones that hide beneath the ordinary, that look like stillness but hold so much strife of memory and the extraordinary. The drought that strips the surface from your knowing is not a punishment but an exposure. The low water moment of your growing, that shows the runes you need for full closure. The drowned runes wait for the revealing drought, for the dry season that brings meaning out. He claimed he learned it from a dying whale, beached on the northern shore one autumn gray. He sat beside it through the final and listened till its breathing fell away. The sounds it made were deeper than the sea, too low for most ears, but his caught the tone, a frequency that lived below the free vibrations humans make when left alone. The whale singer hears what sinks below sound, the language of the deep that few have found. At sea he'd stand at the prow and hum it low, the tone that he had learned in his own chest. And from the gray-green deep there'd come the slow approach of something vast from east or west. The
but drawn by what the whale singer would make. The whales come when the singer calls their name. For every creature answers to its claim. He never hunted them, would not allow the harpoon raised while he was at the bow. He said the whales had given him the vow of passage safe and knowledge from below, to hunt the ones who gave you their great tongue was a betrayal older than all God. The contract made when he had sat among the dying and received against all love. The whale singer keeps the covenant made in the language only dying whales have paid. The strangest thing he told before he died was that the whales sang history long past, that in their calls the oldest world inside was carried in vibration unsurpassed. They sang the shape of coastlines changed by the ocean temperatures of older years, the roots of currents past their sacrifice, the memory of 10,000 years of tears. The whale song carries what no room can hold, the living memory of the ocean.
There is a comfort in the deepest cold that those who've never known it cannot share. The stillness of a world that has been told to silence by the frost's unyielding care. The noise of summer gone, the insects still, the birds reduced to a few winter brave. the world returned to its essential fill of rock and bone and what the cold will say. The cold comfort is the world stripped bare, the honest winter showing what is there. Found the cold to be a kind of truth that summer's abundance had concealed beneath the fullness of the long and easy youth of warmth. The cold uncovered every sheath. In winter you knew clearly who your kin were, who'd share the fire and who would turn away, would carry wood and who would let it thin blur into the excuse of the shorter day. Cold comfort separates the true from false. It shows you who is real when warmth withdraws. Becomes aware of every small sensation and its gift. The warmth of hands, the fire's offered care, the meat that gives the frozen chest a lift. In summer these are ordinary things, unremarked and taken as the dew, but cold makes each small warmth the thing that sings, and gratitude returns to what is true. Cold comfort makes the warm things more than warm, by showing what it's like inside the storm. The winter peoples of the far north know a joy in darkness that the summer lands can only approximate in the glow of what they imagine cold demands. The long night fire with the family near, the story told when outside nothing moves, the laugh that rings more musical and clear against the silence that the cold approves. The cold comfort is the warmth made rare by everything that cold surrounds with care. Do not flee the cold that comes to you, the winter of the spirit and the year. For inside the freeze is something true that only cold conditions can make clear. The stripped bare world has its own austere grace, the silence of the snow its own deep song, the cold that shows you everything in place is the discomfort that makes comfort strong. The cold comfort is the gift of winter's truth, the honest cold that keeps the spirit's youth. glacier moves her fingers with each year. A patience older than the oldest name. It grinds the mountain into something clear, and drops the ground flower into river's frame. The gray-white milk of glacial runoff feeds the valleys where the farms hold on below. The mineral richness that the glacier bleeds is what makes possible the grain to grow. The glacier feeds the living from the deep. Its slow destruction, what the valleys keep. Inside the glacier, something ancient waits. The things that fell into the ice before. The animals sealed in crystalline states, intact across the centuries at core. We found a deer inside the melting edge, its coat still red, its eyes still dark and wide. It lay across a long submerged old ledge, a gift from cold time to the present side. The glacier gives back what the ice has kept, the preserved world in which the past has slept. The old man said the glacier remembered the shape of world before the current land, that under ice the ancient was dismembered from what we knew into a prior strand. They walk the glacier's edge and read the layers, each band of dark and light a different year. The dark years were the summers, like the prayers of winter, stacked in cold from far too near. The glacier is the world's own calendar, each layer pressed in cold and ancient bark. We drank the glacial melt and felt the cold of years 10,000 deep inside the ice. The water tasting of the very old, the world before the world's most ancient prize. Each swallow was 10,000 years of rain, compressed and filtered through the mountain's heart. The cleanest water and the most arcane, the purity of time's own frozen art. The glaciers melt as time made drinkable, the past made present and unthinkable. The glacier will outlast every name we've carved, every rune pressed into the oldest stone. It will be here when every god has starved for worshippers and every faith has blown. And when it finally melts in the last age, it will give back everything it has kept. The animals, the ice preserved old page of world, all the things inside it. slept. The glacier keeps the world for those who come. The greatest archive under winter's drum. Always one more song inside the chest, one verse that never finds the open air, the poem that the poet kept with best intentions for the perfect time and where. But time moves with the impatience of the sea. It does not wait for the right moment's call. The perfect poem lives in what could be, not in the verse we finally let fall. The last song waits for a time that never comes, for those who wait for perfect always numbs. Old Gunnar had the saga half complete. For 20 years beside the fire at night, he said it is not ready, not yet neat, not yet the shape that earns the telling right. He died with it still living in his chest, the saga of the voyage no one heard, the finest work, perhaps his very best, gone with the last exhale of the word. The unfinished saga dies with the skald. The perfect poem by silence is installed. The lesson is not sing before you're ready, for half-made things can harm as much as help. The lesson is the world is never steady enough to wait for any poet's wealth. Find the version of the song that's true, not perfect, never perfect, but alive. The one that carries something real and new, the one that keeps the living truth alive. The good enough song sung is worth far more than the perfect song locked up behind the door. Every Skalda's songs they never sang, the lines too close to home, too raw to share. The verses where the truest feelings hang, too vulnerable to loose into the air. These private songs are not a poet's weakness, they are the source from which all songs descend. The reservoir whose depth enables bleakness to become the verse that others comprehend. The kept song feeds the songs that reach the hall. The private depth makes possible the call. Sing what what you have today while you have breath. Tomorrow the verse may have a different shape. The you that sings today walks close to death, as every living singer has to drape. Not in despair, but in the simple knowing that every song has the last time it's sung. And those who hold the song for their own showing find in the end the song stays always young. The last song is the one you never sang, so sing before the final silence rang. The crystal caught the light that cloud concealed. It showed the sun's position through the gray. A stone that what the overcast had sealed could crack and find the hidden light of day. The navigator held it to his eye and turned it slowly till the shadows met. The equal dark that showed him where the sky held the sun behind the clouded net. The sunstone finds the hidden light above and gives the sailor what the clouds deprive. The Icelandic crystal, clear as water held between two fingers raised against the white. Its double refraction when it spelled the polarized path of hidden light. No magic in it, only physics old. The light that scatters differently in sky, depending on the angle that it's told by the sun's position through the cloud high. The sunstone works by natural law alone. The magic is the physics of the stone. He trained with it for years before he trusted the subtle shadow shift that marked the sun in gray that every other sailor busted through with nothing till the skies were done. He could navigate through weeks of overcast while others lay adrift and prayed for clear. He used the stone and kept the true course fast, and held his bearing through the hidden year. The navigator who as the sunstone navigates through what defeats all others at the gates. The sunstone is the mind's own instrument, the tool that finds the light inside the gray. When certainty is wholly overcast, and nothing seems to lead the certain way. Some people hold an inner sunstone clear that finds direction when the sky goes dark, that polarizes what is hidden there, and shows the hidden sun's remaining mark. The inner sunstone is the quiet mind that finds the light that surface clouds can't blind. Keep looking for the hidden light above. When cloud and fog have swallowed every star, the sun is always somewhere in the shove of clouds that cannot hold it very far. The sunstone teaches that the light persists, that even in the deepest overcast, its angle in the scattered cloud insists on being found by those who hold the last instrument of patience, turned and clear, the stone that finds the sun still hiding here. He hung his sword above the longhouse door on the day he turned from 30 into more. He said, I have been everything this full, long enough to know what I am looking for. He did not go to any temple's call. He did not abduct the southerner's cross. He found his practice in the forest wall and sat with what had always been his loss. The iron monk makes stillness from the blade. The warrior sheath becomes the peace he made. The village thought him broken at the first, that some wound of the mind had stopped the man, that underneath the stillness was a thirst for something that the battle never can. But watching him through seasons in the wood, they saw a different kind of courage bloom, the one that sits with what is understood and doesn't flee the grief inside the room. The iron monk is braver in his still than any warrior climbing any hill. He trained the children in the morning hours, not in the blade but in the breath and thought. He taught them what the discipline empowers, When turned inward, all the stillness taught. They learned to sit through cold and through the doubt, to hold the attention past the restless need, to find the peace that others had screamed out, existed in the quiet's patient seed. The iron monk teaches what he had to find, the battlefield inside the human mind. He took his sword down once in his 5th year. When raiders came the village could not face, he walked out calmly, wordless, showing clear something that stopped the raiders in their place. He did not threaten, did not raise the blade. He simply stood with what he had become, the stillness that the years of practice made, a presence that left every raider numb. The iron monk defeats without the fight. His stillness is more fearsome than his might. Is not diminished but made more complete. The blade needs both the edge and the deep fill of balanced center where two qualities meet. The iron and the monk are not opposed. One sharpens what the other learns to hold. The hardest warrior is the fully closed circle of the fierce made quiet and bold. The iron monk contains both worlds in one, the sword and the silence under the same sun. Every blade that ever tasted war carries something of the battles in its grain. The iron remembers what the steel was for, and holds the weight of every loss and gain. The blade that killed its first in 50 years still has the memory of that first blow's shock. The metal resonates with ancient fears long after time has moved around the clock. The song of swords is sung in iron's grain, each battle pressed into the metal's vein. Old swords sing when they are drawn at night, a sound too low for casual hearing ears, a vibration that the practiced hand held right can feel beneath the blade's long resting years. The smith who forged them listened for this tone. He said the blade was ready when it sang, when the iron found its voice and own, and rang with something past the hammer's clang. The sword that sings its readiness is made, the voiceless blade is just
unfinished trade. We gave our blades to those who'd earned the weight, not to the young who'd never proved the need. For a blade with history carries fate, too heavy for the hand that has not freed itself from fear. The blade would overwhelm the carrier who had not yet matched its worth, would bend the arm that gripped the iron helm. Toward mistakes the elder blade had birthed, the ancient sword chooses who may hold it. The worthy feel its weight as gold and not grit. When enemies clash their blades in battle's press, the swords would recognize each other's past. A moment of metallic consciousness before the human drama moved too fast. Two blades that shared a forge in the same fire would pull their wielders toward each other's face. A recognition older than desire, the iron siblings meeting in their space. Forge mates recognize each other's song, even when the wielders have it wrong. When at last you lay your sword aside, when the arm no longer has the need, let it go to one who can abide its history without the pride of greed. Speak the blade's name one final time aloud, and introduce it to the hand that takes. Tell the story of the battles proud and all the history the iron makes. The sword passed on carries two lives' worth, the giver and receiver on the earth. He sang during the fighting, not before, not the rousing verse of preparation's time, but the actual song inside the roar of iron meeting iron in its rhyme. His voice rose above the battle's din, the kennings flying with the arrow's arc. He documented what was happening in real time before the dying left the mark. The battle poet sings what others fight and makes the moment permanent in life. The warriors said his singing changed the mood, that hearing their own deeds in verse aloud gave them a kind of doubled fortitude to be inside the poem and the crowd. They fought more grandly knowing he would see and name in verse the best of what they did, that even in the terrible and free chaos of the fight their names were bid. The battle poet makes the fighters brave by naming them before they find the grave. The enemy found him most unsettling, a man who sang while others only screamed, whose voice in the chaos was a settling presence that was older than it seemed. They tried to silence him but couldn't reach the singer who was always just outside, the worst of the melee out of each. Direct attack but witnessing inside. The battle poet is the hardest to kill. He moves between the blades with the verse's skill. He never fought himself, that was his gift. The pair of eyes that watched with clarity, the voice that gave the dying ones a lift, of being named inside the poetry. He held the hand of those who would not rise, and sang their final acts into the sky. He made them permanent before their eyes closed on the afternoon they chose to die. The battle poet gives the dying their name and keeps them living in the verse's flame. Long after the last sword has gone to rust, warrior's name is lost, the battle poems will stand against the dust, and keep the moment past all time's hard cost. For words outlast the iron in the end. The verse that catches what the battle was will carry what no monument can bend into the future like a living cause. The battle poet wins what warriors cannot. The permanence of what the sword has fought. He sang during the fighting, not before. Not the rousing verse of preparation's time, but the actual song inside the roar of iron meeting iron in its rhyme. His voice rose above the battle's din, the cannons flying with the arrows arc. He documented what was happening in real time before the dying left the mark. The battle poet sings what others fight and makes the moment permanent in light. The warrior said his singing changed the mood, that hearing their own deeds in verse aloud gave them a kind of doubled fortitude to be inside the poem and the crowd. They fought more grandly knowing he would see and name and verse the best of what they did, that even in the terrible and free chaos of the fight their names were
presence that was older than it seemed. They tried to silence him but couldn't reach the singer who was always just outside. The worst of the melee, out of each direct attack, but witnessing inside. The battle poet is the hardest to kill. He moves between the blades with the verse's skill. He never fought himself, that was his gift. The pair of eyes that watched with clarity. The voice that gave the dying ones a lift of being named. He kept the fire burning on the point. 3 years alone above the rocks and sea. He was the hinge, the keystone and the joint between the ships at night and what they'd be. Without his fire, the harbor mouth was black, the entrance indistinguishable from reef. The ships would come at night and not come back, and find their end before they found relief. The lighthouse keeper serves what he won't see. The ships that pass in darkness, safe and free. He never saw the ships he saved in dark. They passed outside his vision in the night. He only kept the fire and its mark, and let the dark determine who was right. He did not know how many keels had steered by what his hands maintained through cold and rain. How many crews had lived because he'd cleared the dark with what he kept against the main. The lighthouse keeper's gift is anonymous, his service visible to none of us. He kept a log of weather and of ships, the ones he saw by daylight passing through. He wrote in careful hands with chapped old lips the date and flag and where the vessel flew. The log was not for any reader's gain. He had no visitor to show it to. It was the discipline against the plain monotony of what his task went through. The lighthouse keeper writes for his own sake, to keep the mind alert and fully awake. The supply ship came once every changing month, with oil and food and sometimes a new face. The conversation lasted like a front of summer after months of winter's place. He drank in every word the sailor brought, the news of distant halls and battles' end, the ordinary gossip that he'd sought, more than the silver he could always spend. The lighthouse keeper hungers most for words, for solitude is healed by what he's heard. The ships he never saved do not exist. For him the ones who might have hit the reef, who steered by light and so were never missed from the harbors of their waiting and belief. Prevention has no story and no name. The disaster that did not happen leaves no trace. The keeper's work is apt absence from the claim of the saga, and that absence is his grace. The lighthouse keeper's greatest deed is nothing, the nothing that prevents the ship from crushing. At low tide, every rock pool is a world, complete and self-contained in salt and stone. Each one a microcosm tightly furled, with everything a larger sea has known. The urchin in its crevice like a star, the crab that carries its own shell for haul, the anemone that pulls the near and far into its center with its patient call. The tide pool holds the ocean in a cup. Oh, the great sea made small enough to look up. Oh, the children who grew up beside the pool learned their first biology on rocks. The patient curiosity that schools no teacher gives as well as the unlocks. They learn that creatures make their home inside the harshest and the most unlikely place, that life finds what the circumstance provides and turns the limitation into grace. The tide pool child learns life is more than size. The small world holds the large one in disguise. The tide will come and swallow every pool and mix the separated into one. The creature that had ruled the cold and cool will join the vast beneath the same salt sun. This is not loss, but the returning home, the individual into the whole, the drop of water back into the foam, the small life merged into the greater soul. The tide pool is the self before the tide, the individual before the wide. I spend my childhood's best hours at the edge, my knees on rock, my face bent close to sea. The drama of the pool against the ledge, the battles fought in miniature and free. That fought the starfish twice its size, plain sight, through its clear transparency, the endless small disguise of creatures making life through every fear. The tide pool taught me everything I need. The small world is where great lessons seed. Look into the tide pools of your life, the small enclosed and limited world, where all the large world's beauty and its strife is found in miniature and curl. The family is a tide pool and the hall, the village is a tide pool and the clan, each one containing in its salt and small the full complexity of the wider span. The tide pool is the whole world given small, enough to see the pattern of us all. He stood at the place where the kingdoms meet, one foot in the territory of each, the marker stone between his bootless feet, the line that both sides asked him not to breach. He belonged to neither and to both, paid by the one who needed trade to flow, and by the other through a different oath that kept the border peaceful, high and low. The border guard belongs to no one side, and so can serve the both with equal pride. The traders came from east and west each dawn. They paid their tribute at the marker's stone. He weighed the goods and let the cart be drawn through to the other side without a groan. He spoke both languages with equal ease. He knew both customs, festivals, and law. He was the hinge between the old degrees of separation and the common draw. The border guard translates what borders hide, the shared humanity of either side. When conflict came, he was the first to suffer. Both sides suspected his belonging torn. Both sides accused him of the other's buffer, of interests from the side where he was born. He walked the marker stone between the fires of two armies gathering to hate. He spoke to both with what the moment requires, and sometimes talked them backward from the gate. The border guard is peace's most exposed, for peace requires someone standing on the chose. His children grew up speaking both the tongues with equal ease and double understanding. They breathed both the air inside their lungs lands and found the world more wide and less demanding. They became the interpreters of age, the ones who moved between the separate worlds, who read both languages on every page and lived inside the both before it furls. The border children are the world's great bridge. They live on every cultural ridge. The border is not weakness in the line, it is the place where meeting always was. The richest soil is at the river's spine, where different waters mix in their own cause. The Viking who has sailed past every border knows that the line between is always more than either side maintains in its own order. The meeting place is what the gods adore. The border guard protects the mixing place, the sacred space where difference finds its grace. She is older than the oldest oak above, the moss woman who grows in the dark floor, the patient green that needs no storm or shove, just moisture and the shadow and nothing more. She covers what the forest has forgotten, the fallen branches and the crumbling stone. She softens what the winter storms have rotten, and makes the hard world gentler on the bone. The moss woman heals what she grows over, the slow green resurrection of cold closure. The hunter said she moved at night between the trees in shapes too vague for certainty. A green-gray figure barely to be seen between the trunks in old obscurity. She was not threatening, merely present there, the way the forest has its own deep life that humans enter with their noise and wear and barely notice in their daily strife. The moss woman watches from the forest deep. She was here before and will be after sleep. The healers knew her as the source of much that grew inside the moss bed's cool embrace. The plants that needed her specific touch of moisture and of shadow and of grace. They asked her permission at the forest edge before they harvested the plants below. They left a gift beside the mossy ledge and took only the surplus of her grove. The healer asks the moss woman's leave before the medicine plants she will retrieve. In the deep places where the light grows thin, where the forest is most itself and whole, the moss woman is the green felt skin that covers everything with gentle soul. She is the patience that no warrior has, the willingness to grow across a century, to cover what is broken without jazz of announcement or of salvatory. The moss woman teaches without sound that healing happens low upon the ground. When you find yourself in the deep wood lost, look down before you look above the bough. The moss grows thicker on the north side frost and tells you every compass that's your vow. The moss woman offers what the stars do, direction in the darkness of the trees, the patient green that never turns from true, the compass growing quietly in the freeze. The moss woman guides those lost in dark. Her northern face is the forest's landmark.
Larger than the sky, the warp threads are the lives of all who live. The weft is time itself passing by, each crossing what one moment has to give. The pattern that emerges is not planned, at least not in the way a weaver plans, but emerges from the interplaying hand of will and circumstance and prior scan. The Norse loom holds the fabric of all things, each life a thread in what the weaving brings. Earth's threads are dark and thick with gathered weight, the used up warp of all that came before, each thread compressed and tight from carrying fate, until it breaks against the loom's own floor. Heard on these threads are bright with present color, the vivid hues of what is being made. They have not yet gone dull or colder, fuller than what they were before the color fades. School's threads are pale as future adventures always are. Too new to know their color from a star. The weave creates a pattern none can see. While standing at the loom's immediate side, you must step far away to ever be able to see the shape that threads provide. The warrior inside the battle cannot perceive the pattern of the overall. The mother inside the grief cannot plot the shape of what the grief is building tall. The Norn's pattern is only seen from far. And all you see is thread and bar. Some threads are short and brilliant in their length, the ones cut early from the fabric's face. But even short threads give the weave its strength and hold the longer ones in proper place. The child who lives but one brief winter span is not a failed or lesser kind of thread, but a specific color in the plan that holds together what would fall instead. No thread is wasted in the Norn's great loom. Each length exactly right for its own room. When school finally cuts your thread at last, don't ask why it was cut at this one place. The pattern needed what you had amassed and used it where it needed your own grace. The finished thread goes into Earth's great basket of all the lived and finished, done and gone, where it stays forever. No need to ask it why it ended. It simply carries on. Thread lives inside the finished weave, and patterns do not die when threads must leave.
It was already old when we arrived, the oak that shaded half the village square. It had already watched and oak survived 300 years of everything that's there. Our grandmothers were girls beneath its bough. Their grandmothers had played around its root. Its rings contained 1,000 years and out of season, storm and drought, from branch to foot. The 1,000-year oak has seen everything and stands through every loss and every spring. We held the village councils in its shade, the tree itself the oldest member there. Its presence made the arguments less, made from pride and more from something past compared. How do you argue small when something vast and ancient holds the space with patient bark that has absorbed 1,000 winters past and stood in every kind of winter dark? The 1,000-year oak humbles human pride and makes the council's arguments less wide. The lovers carved their names into its skin, 300 years of names in overlapping, each pair believing they were first to begin. The love that had the tree's own bark as backing, the tree outlasted every name it bore. The loves dissolved while the oak stood the same, but something of the lovers stayed before the carving's pressure in the wood's own frame. The 1,000-year oak holds every love in the pressed bark memory of the above. The lightning took the highest branch one year and left a wound that healed in 20 more. The oak grew around the scar without the fear of what the lightning tore from the heart's core. The healer said the oak wound wood had strength beyond what unscathed timber ever gave. That damage healed through, and the full length of time made something stronger of the grave. The oak that heals the lightning strike grows dense. The wound made whole becomes the tree's defense. We planted an acorn when our first child came. We said this tree will outlast all of us. It will grow past the memory of your name and stand when no one living makes the fuss. The tree is the gift we give past our own death to those who come when we are long since gone. The shade will never sit in with our breath, but give to those who need it further on. The planted oak is love given to the future, the tree that grows past every human suture. It started in the rafters just past midnight, when half the hall lay sleeping after feast. A spark from the fire's last unguarded daylight that caught the dry old timber from the east. The first awake was the dog who always slept beside the door and knew the air before. The humans felt the smoke and rose and wept at the sound of a rafter cracking to the floor. The meat hall fire begins in the forgotten spark, the one nobody tended in the dark. We pulled the elders first, the children then, the strong ones last to help the weak ones out. The order that determines women, men. In crisis is the truest test devout. Young Sigrid carried both her brothers through the doorway blocked by fallen burning posts. She held the beam until the last one to have made the threshold cleared, and she was closest. The crisis shows who carries others through, and Sigrid showed the hall what she could do. We stood outside and watched the hall we'd built, with 40 winters of our family's hands, collapse into itself in ash and guilt, of ember drifting over frozen lands. The Jarl said nothing for a long cold hour. He watched the hall become a bed of coal. He watched the symbols of his family's power reduced to what no symbol can control. The burning hall leaves only what is true. The people standing in the cold and dew. By morning we had counted heads entire, and found that no one from the hall had died. The dog had saved more lives than any fire could take from those who woke and ran outside. The Jarl said the hall is timber, pitch and post. It can be built again before the snow. What cannot be rebuilt is what we've lost. When fire takes the ones we need and know, the hall is replaceable, the people not. This truth the meat hall fire has always taught. We built it back in 40 days of labor, every family giving what they had, each neighbor working like their closest neighbor, for the loss of one was every family sad. The new hall stood before the deepest winter, its timber straighter and its roof more sound. It held no memory of the ember splinter, but something better misplaced with what was learned. He should not have survived that field in spring. The blade had found him deep and left him there. The ravens circled in their patient ring, and still he breathed the cold and frosted air. 3 days they found him clinging to the ice, the blood below him dark against the white. The healer said she would not name the price of what his survival asked the coming night. The second chance arrives unannounced, the life that fate has briefly denounced. He woke inside the healer's smoky hall. A month of fever later, thin and lost. He did not know the season or the fall of what his life had nearly paid as cost. The first thing that he asked when words returned was not for water or for news of kin, but did my shield brothers come back who burned with me that morning as we drove them in? The second chance survivor asked for others before himself, before his pain, before the brothers. He changed after the second chance had passed, not in the way of broken men who shrink, but in the deeper way of those recast by what they almost crossed the final brink. The small annoyances fell away like husk, the grudges that he'd carried thin to wear. Each morning at the harbor in the dusk, he felt the extra weight of being there. The second chance man carries gratitude as his first weapon in all attitude. He fought again, for he was what he was. A warrior was the shape his life had made, but something different in the fighting cause, a different reason for the drawn out blade. He fought now for the specific and the near, the child's face at the harbor waving clear, the smell of bread, the fire, the voice that dear to him, the small enormous things held dear. The second chance warrior fights for what is real, the small enormous things the living feel. If you are given back what you had lost, the morning you did not expect to see, the breath that came at unforeseen great cost, the life returned beyond what you could be. Do not waste the second chance on lesser things, on grudges and on pride and cold regret. The life that death returns is one that brings the obligation not to waste or fret. The second chance is the deepest gift. Use it for the things that truly live.
She prepared for 7 days before the walk. No food, no drink except the sacred tea. No idle conversation, little talk. Just the long descent into the free. The fire dancer does not fight the flame. She does not harden souls or trick the mind. She empties herself so fully of all claim that she and fire leave each other kind. The fire dancer walks through by letting go. The art is emptiness, not iron below. The coals were orange-white when she approached. A bed of 10 feet long and heel-width wide. The heat that reached the watching crowd encroached with something past the physical inside. She paused and breathed and found the inner still. That 7 days of preparation built, then walked as if the coals were just the hill beside the hall where she had never felt guilt. The fire dancer crosses what cannot be crossed. For those who give up fear have never lost. The crowd held their collective breathing tight. They watched each step across the burning length. They felt the heat and squinted against the light, and wondered at the depth of human strength. She reached the end and turned without a mark upon the souls that should have been destroyed. She smiled into the edges of the dark and said, "The fire is afraid of void." The fire dancer proves the mind can overrule what physics says should be the body's cruel. She taught the right to those who came with fire, the burning grief, the raging fear inside. She said the same that tames the coal's desire will tame the inner flame you cannot hide. The preparation is the 7 days of sitting with your fire until you know the outer and the inner that aspires. She walked the coals until her 80th year, when age made preparation incomplete. She said, I cannot empty past the fear that age brings to these irreplaceable feet. She watched the younger ones complete the walk, and smiled at each crossing with the knowing of one who found the truth beneath the talk of fire, in the emptiness of going. The fire dancer retires into a flame, the inner fire now entirely her claim.
Praised the wrong jar at the feast, had sung the rival's name above the host, had made the fatal error of the beast, of miscalculating who mattered most. His silver tongue that had been worth its weight in gold for 20 years of bending men, had misfired once and sealed his certain fate, and never found the hall's warmth again. The skald in exile finds his voice alone, and learns to sing without a hall or throne. Between the village fires, too proud to beg, too broken to be proud, he sang for bread to those with small desires, the farmers and the fishermen aloud, the audience that every skald begins, before the hall and the jar silvering, is the ordinary life that slowly wins the truer voice that exile starts to sing. The exile skald finds truth in simpler halls, where bread not silver is the prize that calls. The songs he made in exile were his best. No flattery required, no patron pleased, no calculation of the Lord's request, no need to keep the powerful appeased. He sang the widow's grief without a veil, the farmer's joy of first frost on the field, the child's confusion at the old man's tale, the honest things that hall life kept concealed. The exile song is freed from patron's need, and grows more true by having been free. After 5 years a different jarl arrived, who'd heard the road song sung across the land, who'd found the verses that the exile thrived on making, and requested a command. He offered hall and silver, fire and feast,
The skald considered what the offer was. He thought about the patron and the beast, of compromise that all life always does. The exile skald weighs the hall against the road, and wonders which one carries the truer load. He took the hall and kept the exile's tongue. He sang the jarl with measured, honest praise. He told the truth as long as it was sung, and left when lying would have paid his days. The exile teaches what the hall conceals, that the voice is worth more than the warm seed, that the song that nobody controls and feels is the only song worth singing in the sleet. The skald who kept his exile's truth is free, inside whatever hall he chooses to be.
Every Viking carried a small knife, not for war but for the work of days, the tool that threaded through the whole of life, from cutting bread to carving runes of praise. The knife maker understood this weight, the blade that would be used 1,000 ways, that had to hold its edge through every fate of kitchen work and carving through the haze. The small knife is the most essential blade, the one that daily life is wholly made. He made them small enough to fit the hand of any age, from child to elder. Why? The balance point exactly where the planned control lay naturally at the wrists inside. The steel he chose was not the hardest ore, for hard steel snaps where softer steel will bend. He wanted the knife that could endure more than perfect, just reliable to the end. The knife maker values reliable over fine, the blade that works through every use and time. A knife given at birth would last a life, or longer pass through generations' hands, each owner sharpening away the strife of daily use to new and sharper bands. The knife that served the grandfather's meal would serve the grandchild's wood carving art, would serve whatever task required the steel of a small blade close to every heart. The life knife travels further than the sword, through more hands and more uses than the horde. The best knife he ever made was plain, no decoration and no silver wire, a handle worn smooth by use and rain, a blade still sharp from the original fire. He made it for himself and used it daily, for 40 years of everything
not so gaily as the stories tell of what the makers made. The knife maker's finest is his own most used, the plain blade that by daily work is fused. Give your children a good knife before all, before the sword or shield or bow or spear, for daily life will ask the everyday call of the small blade held throughout the year. The sword is for the crisis and the rare, the knife is for the morning and the night, the one that cuts the bread and shapes the prayer, and makes the small necessities of right. The small knife is the first and lasting gift, the blade of daily life's most honest lift.
It begins with a sound before the sight, the crack and boom of ice releasing hold, the river's voice returning to the light, after the months of silence and of cold. First one crack, then 1,000 cracks combine, the ice sheet broken into floating plates, the water underneath the frozen line finally pushes through the winter's gates. The spring thaw begins a sound before sight, the cracking ice that gives the river life. The birds returned before the green appeared, they came ahead to claim the nesting space. They sang against the brown and winter cleared landscape with the confidence of grace. They sang as if the green were already there, as if their singing called the green to come, as if the world below the freezing air was waiting for the bird song's thawing drum. The birds sing spring before the spring arrives, their faith in warmth is what the cold survives. The children were the first to find the flowers, the small brave ones that pushed through frozen mud, before the air had given up its hours of cold. The first green pressed against the crud, they brought them home with triumph in their hands, as if they'd found the proof the world still lived, as if the winter's long and cold commands were contradicted by what spring had given. The first flower of spring proves winter wrong, and children understand this all along. The long ships in their winter storage frames were pulled and checked as the ice pulled away. Each plank examined for the winter's claims on wood that had been sitting cold all day. The tar was melted and the caulking pressed, the oars unwrapped from their protecting cloth. The crew assembled, eager and addressed to the season opening its mouth. The spring thaw launches every Viking ship from the winter's long and frozen grip. Every spring is a resurrection true, the world dying and returning whole, the ice releasing everything it knew of winter's cold authority and toll. We celebrate it not because it's warm, but because the cycle held its promise right, that what goes into the dark and cold and storm returns again to the heat and the light. The spring thaw is the world keeping its word, the oldest promise every living heard. Someone must do what the community decides, and judgment must be carried through. A task of such peculiar unity, with mercy and with violence through and through. He was not proud of what his role required. He trained for years so it would not be slow. He learned the anatomy until he'd fired the knowledge into the single certain blow. The thread cutter serves justice, not himself. He takes the weight no other takes from shelf. He spoke with every condemned the night before. He asked them if they had a final wish. He carried messages from the final shore to families and settled the last dish. Not from cruelty, but from the deep belief that every life deserved its proper end, that even those who'd caused the greatest grief were owed the dignity of one last friend. The thread cutter is the condemned's last kindness he offers. What execution's blindness? The village needed him and kept him close, but never invited him to feasts or flame. He ate alone and drank alone the most, for what he carried had no social claim. The children did not play beside his house. The women crossed
to other paths in town. He moved through life as quiet as a mouse, wearing what his office gave, a crown of necessary isolation's price. The thread cutter pays for service in the ice. He asked to be released after 10 years. He told the thing his hands had learned enough, that what the role required in blood and tears had cost him something he could not rebuff. The thing agreed and named another man, who came to him for training in the art. He taught him everything that he began with, and gave the new man the hardest part. Remember every name you're given to, and for anonymity would break what you must tend. Honor those who carry what you will not, the ones who do the work the rest refuse, who take the necessary and the hot, unpleasant, necessary, and who choose. The thread cutter holds a community's will in the single motion of a single hand. He is the price of judgment and the still small horror that makes justice understand. The thread cutter makes possible the law. Without him, justice would remain in awe.
Her father never took her out to sea. He said the ocean was no place for her. But standing on the shore, she learned to see what those who sailed had never thought to stir. She saw the waves from shore the way a god sees battles from above and not within. She read the patterns of the ocean's plot, from where the full perspective could begin. The sailor's daughter sees the sea entire, from the shore that shows the full effect of fire. She learned the tides from watching years of turn, the way the water changed an hour before the storm arrived, the signs that sailors earn. From years at sea, she saw them from the shore. She drew the currents on the sand at low tide, the patterns of the water as it drained. She traced the rivulets where the sea would slide, and built a map from what the ebb explained. The shore
see the maps what seamen sail through. The pattern only the outside view can do.
When her father's crew came back confused about the current that had pushed them wide, she stood before the old men and diffused the mystery with her shore-born guide.
She drew the sandbar shift of the prior year, the new configuration of the flow, and showed them why the current had appeared in channels that they hadn't thought to know. The shore-born daughter solved what sailors missed, the view from land that seamen always kissed. Her father finally took her on the tide when she was 30 and had proven clear. She stood at the prow and looked the ocean wide and said, "It's smaller than it looked from here." He laughed and said, "The sea is always more inside than any distant view can give." She said, "And yet the view from off the shore shows what the inside view cannot retrieve." The shore and sea perspective are both needed, and the sailor's daughter shows this unimpeded. Name the women who stood on the shore and learned the ocean that their fathers sailed through years, whose knowledge was the distance that they earned from watching and from learning through their fears. The navigator in the ship depends on the shore knowledge that the watchers give, on the lighthouse keeper and the one who bends to read the shore for where the deep lines live. The sailor's daughter earns her place at sea for what she knows that no sailor could see.
Tense is just the way that speech has present, past, and future in its form. The wind that speaks of what lies out of reach ahead of us, the coming of the storm. The wind that tells of what has just gone by, the trailing edge of something passed along. The wind that says right now, right here, right high, this is the world at this exact of song. The wind's grammar teaches those who hear The tenses of the air, both far and near. The sailor learned the dialects of wind, the way the coast wind differed from the deep, the way the mountain wind had always sinned against the rule by breaking from the steep. The thermal that rose from the sunlit shore, the cold that poured from the glacier's face, each one a different word in the wind's lore, a vocabulary of air and space. The sailor speaks the wind's own dialect and reads the air for what it will affect. The smell inside the wind is its own text, the pine smoke meaning habitation near, the salt tang meaning open water next, the sweetness meaning summer green and clear. The hunter used the wind before the eye for what the eye could not yet see or find. The wind arrived before the deers nearby, presence reached the other senses' mind. The wind speaks before the eyes can see. Its grammar is the language of the free. The children who grew up beside the shore learn the wind's vocabulary in play. Before they knew they were learning any lore, they'd absorbed the grammar of the day. They knew which wind meant father would come home, which wind meant the boats would stay in port, which wind meant you could safely let the foam of distant shore become your distant thought. The shore child speaks the wind before the word, the air's own language in the body heard. Listen to the wind before you act, before you raise the anchor, ship the oar, before you commit to what can't be retracted. Let the wind tell you what the air has stored. The wind arrives before the consequence, it carries news of what the sky intends. Its grammar is the oldest future tense, the language of beginnings and their ends. The wind's grammar is the world's first tongue, the oldest language ever said or sung.